All right, well, I'm here at Jefferson Forest, and I've got a friend of the channel, Brad here, who happened to take some advice on coming to this location, and we just showed up together. So we're hoping to catch some trilliums, maybe some other wildflowers, yes. See what we get.
Looks like a beautiful day.
It really does, yeah. All right, well, Brad has gone off to a side over there, and I've just come to this really interesting scene with a bit of a log and a trillium. Let me show you what it's all about. So I don't normally do this, but I'm going to turn on the video here so I can give you an idea of what this scene is. And maybe I'll just zoom out a little bit and sort of discuss through it. So I'm waiting for a bit of a sunbeam before I can get this shot, because I think that's going to make it absolutely pop. But basically the idea is that over here I have this nice sort of fallen birch tree, and it's got these nice sort of white pieces of birch bark on it, sort of fallen. And then there's this one trillium that I've just focused on right here. Let me sort of zoom in and see if you can see that this one trillium is just sticking out above the rest. And I've kind of got it on a little bit of a hill, so it's sort of sloping up, so I get this background and foreground of more trilliums. Now, in these types of changing conditions, I'm picking very particular camera settings. So to be able to shoot this scene and really bring a lot of separation to that one subject, what I'm doing is I'm going to focus on that subject, but then I'm going to go for a really low aperture. So the lowest that I can do on this lens is 5.6. With that, I can get a little bit higher of a shutter speed, which is needed because there is a little bit of wind here that's going to move that one flower around. But then really what I'm going to be able to get out of this is that shallow depth of field, right? That's going to make it really, really great. And I've changed a couple of things. I moved over to continuous autofocus because that's going to keep my subject in focus as I'm sort of hitting my focus button. And I've also taken off what I usually have as my my timer, like a 5-second or 10-second timer, because I want to be able to capture this exact moment, which I think is happening right now, and then just take a shot, take a couple of other ones without having to wait. And because I'm going to bring my shutter speed really high, probably like 1/500th of a second, I'm not really too concerned about needing to, make sure the camera is still. The shutter is going to keep my image still after that. So I'm going to go ahead and take this shot in a sec. One of the things that I see landscape photographers struggle with a bit when they move over to specifically flowers or really wildlife is the compositional techniques still apply, but the way that you apply those, where you put your camera, really changes. And one of those things is that when you're shooting a small subject like this, and I think a lot of macro photographers and wildlife photographers will know this, you really want to be on its visual plane. And really what I mean by that is it's not about getting your camera low or getting your camera high. It's about getting your camera on the same level of being as that flower. So think if you were taking a portrait of that flower, really the same as if you were taking a portrait of that person. You don't want to look down at them or look way up from them. That doesn't really give a visual sense of exactly how they exist, right? And so the same thing is true of a flower. What I've done actually is sort of leveled my camera out, and I'm basically on the same plane as with this flower. And what that's really helping me do is sort of bring focus to the flower as the main subject. All right, well, Brad's taken off. I think he got some absolutely beautiful shots. There's this one of a trillium with a stump behind it. The light is just so perfect, and I think that's a incredibly good shot. I want to talk a little bit about aperture, because I think the conventional wisdom on exactly what aperture to choose for this type of flower photography, I don't know that it always works. Well, really it depends on your lens. So right here, I'll just show off my settings here. I am at f6.3. Now, I've got this Tamron 50-400, and right at this particular point, I'm almost at 300 millimeter. F6.3 is the lowest aperture that I can get, but I can see a little bit of trouble, and I wonder if you can see this too. The bokeh behind the scene and a little bit before it is what I would call busy. And what that means is that the blur has created almost additional lines that sort of distract the eye because there's a lot of tension. And I really don't like that look. So sometimes what I think actually is better is going down to like f8, f9. You get a little bit less depth of field, but if you're really good at separating your subject from the background with just the composition, that's not really going to matter. But one of the things it does, and I really hope that you can see this, is change this background. So let me see if I can actually show you, I'll go off the scene a little bit and show you what I mean. So f6.3, you can see these trees, the blur is just, it's very tense. I don't know how to describe it, but it just feels very tense. Now, if I bring that to, let's say f9, f10, you can make out that these are trees, but you still get a little bit of that background separation, but it just feels a little creamier. And one of the things, the emotion that I'm getting from that is it's just a little calmer. Again, I'll see if I can bring this back, where the 6.3 is just sort of busy, and the f10, f11, you get a little bit more definition, and it brings down the tension a little bit. I don't know how better to describe it than that. So I think in this case, it's one of those things where your lens is going to dictate just how the blur, the bokeh sort of looks, and you shouldn't just go on a setting. You should really like play around with it a little bit to understand what's going to give you the best scene, and think about whether you want your audience, whether you want the viewer of this photo to be tense, or what's going to change the mood. Maybe you want a little bit of a creamier look like I want, to really like bring down the anxiety of this flower and really sort of make it a little bit more of a peaceful scene.
This problem is pretty apparent on this close-up I took a bit later. There's a lot I like about this image, the detail, the light on the background helping to frame the individual trillium, but the background is busy and is distracting. It forces your eye to examine it, and your attention is not on the subject I'm trying to get you to look at. Compare that to this photo which Brad kindly provided. It has much more scenery, there is a lot in focus, and there's a clear subject that stands out from the others. Context is gained here by using a higher aperture to help paint a fuller picture of the scene. Thank you for providing this image, Brad. I appreciate it.
Well, this is kind of what it is right now. I'm looking around, see if I can find individual trilliums that are sort of popping up from the group or have a really interesting background. I really like this cluster of sort of 3 birch trees over here, and so I'm trying to find something that's going to work with that, and I'm coming up a little short, but I'm going to keep going at it. I think, while I don't want to trample the flowers as much as I possibly can, I am going to try to sort of make my way in a circle around this set of tree and sort of see exactly what I can see. I don't really know what that'll look like just yet, but try something. And it doesn't take long to find something that stands out from the rest. This type of composition is one I really, really like, and the reason is because, in this sea of flowers, right? Of course, they're all at different heights, and I really like to find one that's just sort of like popping up, right? It's its own little thing amongst the others, and usually that means it's a little stronger, a little hardier, and so sometimes that means that it's just more full of a flower. It looks a little bit nicer. So I found this really nice background, which is really just the bottom of this tree trunk, and the sort of birch tree, the sort of silvery color, the white, sort of brings it all together and makes this really nice scene. Now, really what I want to focus in on is this flower here, and I'm gonna just take my exposure compensation down. Actually, it's going to be down quite a lot, negative 1.7, so that I don't get any blown out highlights in the flower. It's okay, I think, if the low lights are a little noisy. I may not experience that, but it's okay as long as I don't blow out the highlights of this very white flower in the sun. Tricky to do, but once you've got it set up, you really appreciate the detail by sort of bringing your exposure down in that. So let's take a look at what this focus has done. Yeah, the continuous autofocus here has captured this flower even though it was moving just slightly in the wind, and I sort of prefer that over manual focus because you won't be able to manually focus on a flower that's just sort of moving back and forth in the wind. So that continuous autofocus really keeps that subject tracked and does a much better job of sort of getting it in focus, and it looks really quite beautiful here. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about is backgrounds. Now, you absolutely can take a photo of a flower with really just nothing in the background and sort of, in your post, in your editing, you can black that out, and I think that looks really good. However, I think you can take advantage of some of the natural background. So in this case, I've got a flower that's sort of just coming up from underneath this fallen tree, and this piece of wood is really quite rotted through. It's been here quite a long time, and it's got some moss growing on it, and actually the flower is just kind of creeping up and the moss is sort of right above it. So what I like about this is I get a little bit of the scenery of sort of what's happening with this flower, this tiny little vignette of what's going on, but also I get the natural forest sort of elements as the background, and if I do this right, they won't be distracting. What you can see here is I've got this tree, I've got this moss, I've got this, this stump, there's another trillium here, and then all these sort of leaves of this trillium. But this one trillium just sort of poking out, I don't know, just something I like about it. So I'm going to try to move this around, maybe compose it in such a way where I get a little bit of color of the stump more than just the moss, and I can really show off the sort of frontward facing piece of this trillium and see how that goes. I talked about getting on the same sort of plane of existence as this flower. I was just a little bit above it, and what I found was I was looking down at it and it didn't really work. So I'm just sort of expanding out my tripod so that I can bring the camera even lower. The trick, of course, is that I'm now filthy, covered in the ground, but it doesn't matter because I've got great shots and I've had a great time. Well, that's all for me. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.